Hi everyone, I'm Claire, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to give you 5 tips on how to write and edit great dialogue. But before we get started, I have a very exciting announcement. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, I'm going to be joining my friend and fellow YouTuber Ashleigh on her channel to do a live write-in. This is my first live write-in. I'm super excited. I think it's going to be really fun, so if you want to stop by her channel at 4 p.m. Eastern Time to write with us, you should. We're going to be doing some sprints and chatting about our projects. So before I dive into my tips, first I want to go over the purpose of dialogue. Dialogue is supposed to do one of two things. Dialogue either 1, shows character, or 2, it advances the plot. As a writer, it's your job to take your reader by the hand and pull them through your story. This means that you want to show your reader the story as best you can and not drag them through lots of boring sections. You want to keep them engaged, which means that you need to cut out what's not important. Dialogue in fiction is not supposed to mirror exact speech patterns. You don't want your characters to be telling winding stories with lots of ums and likes that have nothing to do with your plot, because it's boring to read. You do want your characters to have unique voices, but you don't want it to have any fluff. You want your dialogue to sound like real people speaking, but real people speaking for a specific reason. So, with that said, here are my 5 tips on writing and editing great dialogue. 1, don't think about voice until you've reached the editing stage. When you're writing your first draft, try not to worry about voice. Just focus on writing until you get to the end of your story and have your characters say whatever you want them to on your way there. When you're writing your first draft and not thinking about voice, your characters are probably going to sound pretty similar to each other because all of your characters are coming out of your head and therefore they're all natural variants of your own unique writing voice. But seriously, don't stress about dialogue when you're writing your first draft. When I've tried to focus on writing dialogue and perfecting character voice as I'm drafting, I get really caught up in my own head and I overthink every single thing I have my characters say. This makes me slow down a lot because I'm paralyzed and overthinking everything I'm writing, and it also doesn't leave me with a better product. I'm still getting to know my characters as I'm drafting, so I have to get to know them before I can figure out what their authentic voices would sound like. I will note that this is true unless you're writing a sequel. If you're writing a sequel, I assume that you've already written a first book and therefore kind of know what your characters sound like already. When you were editing your first book, you probably did a lot of this work trying to figure out what their authentic voices sounded like so that they're kind of gonna be in your head when you start writing your sequel. So if you're writing a sequel, these character voices are probably gonna come into the story quite naturally, but still, even if you're writing a sequel, don't actively think about it. You can edit character voice and dialogue. You don't have to get it right on the first time. My second tip is to trim your dialogue down. Let's say you have a first draft. That first draft is completely written. All of your characters say some good things and some really messy things, crazy tangents that they go on. They all probably sound kind of similar to each other. So now it's time to edit. When you sit down to edit your dialogue, the first question you want to ask yourself is, does your character need to say this? A lot of time when writing dialogue, we make it a lot longer than it has to be. Often, answers to questions are implied, and characters don't need to explicitly say them. Maybe you have a lot of instances where your characters are saying the exact same thing twice. Take this sentence, for example. The team is hard to get onto. I'm surprised you made such a competitive team. You don't need both of these sentences in this piece of dialogue. If you just say, I'm surprised you made such a competitive team, it will encapsulate the meaning of the previous 2 sentences together, and it will make your dialogue less bulky. Go through the dialogue in your story and read every piece of dialogue out loud. Confront every piece of dialogue and see if this is told as succinctly as it can be. Can you cut out any superfluous words? Remember, sometimes silence is a lot more powerful than dialogue. My third tip is to cut the following words out of your dialogue. I'm going to put in parentheses mostly because there are some instances where you can keep these in your dialogue, but you just want to keep them to a minimum. The list is as follows: yeah, yes, no, because these are all usually implied, anyway, really, well, but, as the beginning of a sentence, listen, look, hi, hello, you're welcome, how are you, so, rather, totally, completely, really, and most adverbs. You should get rid of all pleasantries. You do not need them. When 2 of your characters greet one another, you don't need them to say, hi, how are you? Oh, I'm good, how are you? Oh, I'm good, it's a little windy today. Oh, I know, right? This is boring. I promise you, You do not need it. Adverbs are also fine, you just want to keep them to a minimum. You want to make sure that you're not relying on adverbs to tell your readers how your character is feeling. You want to be able to show your readers how your character is feeling. And if you find that you need to use an adverb in order to do that, then you should get rid of the adverb and find another way to do that. But an adverb here and there is fine. Gone Girl does it. If Gone Girl does it, so can you. Just on the adverbs thing, I'm not in any way condoning the plot. I'm not out here telling you guys to become Nick and Amy Dunns. Communicate with your partners. 4, try not to use your dialogue to tell things explicitly. Have you ever read an opening scene of a story where it's painfully obvious that the author is trying to convey some kind of information to the reader through their characters' dialogues and it's written very weird? Maybe the scene sounds something like this. Character A, hey man, did you hear the news about Sally? Character B, oh yeah, I did hear the news that Sally got married to that man she met 6 years ago while on a destination wedding in Mexico. Character A, how did you know that? Everyone knows you don't like gossip and like to live off the grid ever since your daughter died 5 months ago. People, do not talk like that. Try a different version of this conversation. Character A, Sally's wedding was so much fun. Character B, oh, I didn't hear about that. Character A, they had it in Mexico, you know, to pay homage to where they met. Character B, totally uninterested. Good for them. Character A, how are you doing, by the way? I haven't talked to you, well, I think since. Character B, I don't talk to anybody. This is sloppily written, but you get the idea. It doesn't have all of the same information as the first scene does, but that information is not all important. Also, if you want to convey to your readers that one of your characters has a tragic past, you can show that in other ways. You can create an aura of mystery around it by having character A inquire and to see how they are doing, and have character B just cut them off completely. Then you can have character B go home and maybe go into their dead daughter's bedroom and pick up a teddy bear or something and cry. Or maybe character B has nightmares of some kind. This will show the readers that there is some kind of trauma there, instead of using dialogue to really artificially and weirdly explain it to the readers. And my 5th and final tip is keep your dialogue tags simple. Said is good. If you're gonna use a dialogue tag, use said. I found a really great article from the Writing Your First Novel blog that talks a lot about dialogue tags. This is a screenshot from this article. People say things. They don't wheeze, gasp, sigh, laugh, grunt, snort, reply, retort, exclaim, or declare them. Josh dropped onto the couch. I'm beat. Not, Josh was exhausted. He dropped onto the couch and exclaimed tiredly, I'm beat. I hate you, Samantha said, narrowing her eyes. Not, I hate you, Samantha blurted ferociously. Sometimes people whisper or shout or mumble, but let your choice of words imply whether they are grumbling, etc. If it's important that they sigh or laugh, separate the action from the dialogue. Amy sighed. It's gonna be a long day, she said. Now, I agree with most of this, but also I do sometimes use asked as a dialogue tag or replied. Just make sure to keep them simple. They don't all have to be said, but they shouldn't be things like gasp or wheeze. I love writing character action before dialogue. Nate shoves his hands in his pockets. I play hockey, but I'm not that good. You can tell Nate is speaking here because on the same line, he shoved his hands into his pockets. You don't need a dialogue tag to indicate that he's the one saying that. In the same scene, here is my 14-year-old protagonist Mason talking to her best friend Nate, who's also 14, on the day that they met. You have to be good if you made the team, I say. Everybody's really good. Red races to his cheeks. I don't want to embarrass him, so I changed the subject. Where are you from? I just moved here from New York City. Why? Because my stepdad got a new job. Your parents are divorced? No, my dad died when I was 2. How? Car accident. Sorry. The scene goes on, and as they keep talking, I sprinkle in physical descriptions and descriptions of their surroundings to make the scene seem more real. However, sometimes you might be writing a scene where you have more than 2 people speaking. In this case, you would use a mixture of dialogue tags and action. For example, do you think she's talking to someone? Jonah interrupts. Miles pulls the neck of his sweater off his chest. If she isn't talking to someone, she sure is convincing. She'd make a good mime, Jonah says, if we had a club at school. I snort. You should start one. Here, I use a mixture of action and dialogue tags to show whether it's Miles, Jonah, or Shiloh who is speaking. As you can see, I don't always use said for dialogue tags. Even though said is the most standard one to use and the one that typically is able to blend into the background, you can also use asked if it's a question, or interrupted if someone's being cut off. I like using interrupted if my character is thinking about something and then somebody says something that brings their attention back to them. I also sometimes use muttered or whispered if they have to keep quiet. Also, remember not to overuse dialogue tags because it can get distracting. Don't use adverbs in dialogue tags either. Try and use context to convey tone. Instead of saying, "Don't say that," I grunt forcefully, say, "I jab my finger at him." Don't say that. So those are my 5 tips. Only after you've made sure that your dialogue is clean do you want to go back and make sure that your characters have unique voices. You want them to all sound like real people who have their own authentic ways of speaking and thinking. This is going to make the world in your story really shine. I made a whole separate video on this, so if you want to hear my tips on how to do this, go head over to my video called 7 Tips for Writing Unique Character Voices, and I've linked it in the description and also right here in the card section of the video. I hope you found this video helpful. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel for more writing content coming your way every Monday. My name is Claire Fraze. I'm an award-winning young adult author who uses this channel to share with you the tips that helped me make my own writing better. Also, don't forget to follow me on social media. I have all of the links in the description, and I'm also giving away a free copy of my debut novel to anyone who wants to subscribe to my mailing list, so I have that link also in the description. Have a good week, everyone, and happy writing.